Ontaora, 1890. To the editor of Free Russia. I thank you for the compliment of your invitation to say something, but when I ponder the bottom paragraph on your first page, and then study your statement on your third page, of the objects of the several Russian liberation parties, I do not quite know how to proceed. Let me quote here the paragraph referred to. But men's hearts are so made that the sight of one voluntary victim for a noble idea stirs them more deeply than the sight of a crowd submitting to a dire fate they cannot escape. Besides, foreigners could not see so clearly as the Russians how much the government was responsible for the grinding poverty of the masses, nor could they very well realize the moral wretchedness imposed by that government upon the whole of educated Russia. But the atrocities committed upon the defenseless prisoners are there in all their baseness, concrete and palpable, admitting of no excuse, no doubt or hesitation, crying out to the heart of humanity against Russian tyranny. And the Tsar's government, stupidly confident in its apparently unassailable position, instead of taking warning from the first rebukes, seems to mock this humanitarian age by the aggravation of brutalities. Not satisfied with slowly killing its prisoners, and with burying the flower of our young generation in the Siberian deserts, the government of Alexander III resolved to break their spirit by deliberately submitting them to a regime of unheard-of brutality and degradation. When one reads that paragraph in the glare of George Kennan's revelations, and considers how much it means, considers that all earthly figures fail to typify the Tsar's government, and that one must descend into hell to find its counterpart, one turns hopefully to your statement of the objects of the several liberation parties, and is disappointed. Apparently, none of them can bear to think of losing the present hell entirely. They merely want the temperature cooled down a little. I now perceive why all men are the deadly and uncompromising enemies of the rattlesnake. It is merely because the rattlesnake has not speech. Monarchy has speech, and by it has been able to persuade men that it differs somehow from the rattlesnake, has something valuable about it somewhere, something worth preserving, something even good and high and fine when properly modified, something entitling it to protection from the club of the first comer who catches it out of its hole. It seems a most strange delusion, and not reconcilable with our superstition that man is a reasoning being. If a house is afire, we reason confidently that it is the first comer's plain duty to put the fire out in any way he can. drown it with water, blow it up with dynamite, use any and all means to stop the spread of the fire and save the rest of the city. What is the Tsar of Russia but a house afire in the midst of a city of 80 millions of inhabitants? Yet, instead of extinguishing him together with his nest and system, the liberation parties are all anxious to merely cool him down a little and keep him. It seems to me that this is illogical, idiotic, in fact. Suppose you had this granite-hearted, bloody-jawed maniac of Russia loose in your house, chasing the helpless women and little children, your own. What would you do with him? Supposing you had a shotgun. Well, he is loose in your house, Russia. And with your shotgun in your hand, you stand trying to think up ways to modify him. Do these liberation parties think that they can succeed in a project which has been attempted 1,000,000 times in the history of the world and has never in one single instance been successful? The modification of a despotism by other means than bloodshed. They seem to think they can. My privilege to write these sanguinary sentences in soft security was bought for me by rivers of blood poured upon many fields in many lands, but I possess not one single little paltry right or privilege that come to me as a result of petition, persuasion, agitation for reform, or any kindred method of procedure. When we consider that not even the most responsible English monarch ever yielded back a stolen public right until it was wrenched from them by bloody violence, is it rational to suppose that gentler methods can win privileges in Russia? Of course, I know that the properest way to demolish the Russian throne would be by revolution. But it is not possible to get up a revolution there. So the only thing left to do, apparently, is to keep the throne vacant by dynamite until a day when candidates shall decline with thanks. Then organize the republic. And on the whole, this method has some large advantages. For whereas a revolution destroys some lives which cannot well be spared, the dynamite way doesn't. Consider this. The conspirators against the Tsar's life are caught in every rank of life from the low to the high. And consider, if so many take an active part where the peril is so dire, is this not evidence that the sympathizers who keep still and do not show their hands are countless for multitudes? Can you break the hearts of thousands of families with the awful Siberian exodus every year for generations and not eventually cover all Russia from limit to limit with bereaved fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters who secretly hate the perpetrator of this prodigious crime and hunger and thirst for his life? Do you not believe that if your wife or your child or your father was exiled to the mines of Siberia for some trivial utterances wrung from a smarting spirit by the Tsar's intolerable tyranny, and you got a chance to kill him and did not do it, that you would always be ashamed to be in your own society the rest of your life? Suppose that refined and lovely Russian lady, who was lately stripped bare before a brutal soldiery and whipped to death by the Tsar's hand in the person of the Tsar's creature, had been your wife, or your daughter, or your sister, and today the Tsar should pass within reach of your hand. How would you feel? And what would you do? Consider that all over vast Russia, from boundary to boundary, a myriad of eyes filled with tears when that piteous news came, and through those tears that myriad of eyes saw, not that poor lady, but lost darlings of their own, whose fate, her fate brought back with new access of grief out of a black and bitter past, never to be forgotten or forgiven. If I am a Swinburnian and clear to the marrow I am, I hold human nature in sufficient honor to believe there are 80 million mute Russians that are of the same stripe, and only one Russian family that isn't.